Welcome to today's mini workshop on sun run training. By the end of this lesson, you should have a better understanding of basic training methodologies, specifically as they relate to cardiovascular training, nutritional strategies for race day, as well as injury prevention tips and tricks. So let's begin by looking at continuous training as part of our basic training methodologies. Continuous training implies that regardless of what kind of exercise you're doing, it is sustainable. So we think about going the distance. Continuous training is often long distance, lower intensity cardio. So some people might be able to run for long distances, others may prefer walking for long distances, and some might even enjoy hiking. How long you can sustain continuous training is a level that is specific to you and your body's conditioning. But the more you practice, the longer you're going to be able to go. If you're out of breath, then your intensity is too high for continuous training. So just remember, if you want to go the distance, make sure that your intensity is at a pace that is comfortable for you. And again, as you improve in this area, you'll notice that you're able to handle higher and higher intensities without fatiguing too much. Interval training is different from continuous training in that it implies you're not doing one consistent pace all the way through. So with interval training, you can pair various intensities with each other. And so we'll often look at the basic concept of a higher intensity interval paired with a lower intensity interval. The higher intensity interval is meant to test your cardiovascular abilities, and then the lower intensity interval is meant to allow you to recover and rest to prepare you to do the higher intensity interval again. So your high intensity interval can honestly be whatever you're comfortable with or whatever you want to do. They do not have to be high intensity. They don't have to hurt or not feel good. But for the avid athlete who wants to increase their time or increase their lactic acid tolerance, these high intensity intervals absolutely can be demanding, taxing, and burn through the legs and muscles. Use the lower intensity interval to recover from this before you're ready to go again. With repeated bouts of high and low intensity, you train your body to adapt to the higher demands, and eventually they'll seem easier. You know you're ready to increase your intensity when what you were doing last week is no longer as hard as it was before. So now let's have a brief look at continuous training and interval training and how you might apply this to your week. It's great to utilize a combination of both. So if we take a look at the color differentiation in this table, you have red and blue. The blue cells imply lower intensity or even rest days, and the red cells imply your exercise or your higher intensity days. So this is a program for somebody who is willing to exercise 3 days a week. You're going to do your exercises with 1 day of rest in between. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday make for a great training day, and then you ensure you have adequate rest days in between. Now we can take a look at a potential training program for somebody who wants to do cardio more than 3 days a week. And sometimes I get asked, is it okay to perform cardio up to 7 days a week? To which I say, absolutely. You can walk every day, and if you can handle higher intensities, then you can run for some of those walks, and then you can jog for some of those walks. And as long as you're giving yourself adequate rest in between your higher intensity, it's going to be fine. So again, looking at the color distinction between red and blue, blue implies rest or lower intensity days. And when I pair the words rest and lower intensity, we can think of rest as not being purely lying down and doing nothing, but we look at the concept of active rest. So for somebody who is an athlete and is used to running, a day where you're only walking is a great example of actively resting. So now we look at a 7-day-a-week cardio program where you're going to be doing intervals of a higher intensity, lower intensity. So Monday you start with your lower intensity walk, Tuesday you go into your run. Wednesday you walk as low intensity, Thursday you run. Friday you go into a jog as a lower intensity day, and then Saturday you may have a walk as another lower intensity day, which then has given you enough rest to go for your Sunday long run. And this long run is typically used to increase your distance. So again, taking a look at how we're providing the body adequate rest in between the higher intensity days. Now let's take a look at some nutritional strategies for race day. Food provides energy for the body. If we break it down into the three main macronutrients, or the three macronutrients, we're looking at fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. Each of these macronutrients literally translate into a specific amount of kilocalories of energy. Food also helps replenish stored energy. So when we exercise, we're actually depleting the body of blood glucose, and we also then dip into muscle glycogen and liver glycogen stores. We don't have to get into the technical science of this because then it will become a lecture that is way too long, but ultimately food helps provide energy for the body. We eat this food, we digest it, and the body turns it into a form of immediate energy that can be used the minute or second we need it. So when we're thinking about nutritional strategies for race day, one of the really important things that we have to consider is that we have adequate energy for our training session and our event. If we have gone a long period without eating food, and we've even been active within that period, then we have depleted our immediate energy stores, and we do not want to go into a training event or a race event under these conditions if our goals are for increased performance. So what we want to look at is proper digestion times prior to our event or even for our training sessions. And all of your training sessions between now and race day can actually be used as little test days for what I ate for lunch. Did that make me feel good for today's workout? And you might find that some workouts you felt great based on eating X versus eating Y. And if you want to keep a little logbook for this, by all means. So when we're looking at digestion times, I like to think in really basic terms. Dinner style meals, which often are a little bit heavier, may consist of some heavy proteins and starches, may take upwards of 4 to 5 hours to digest. So if you have a dinner style meal, do not exercise for at least the next 4 to 5 hours. Lunches, which may consist of a soup, a salad, maybe a hard-boiled egg as an option of protein, a few slices of chicken, or even no protein, may take upwards of 2 to 3 hours to digest. And then breakfasts, which may consist of cereal or oatmeal or yogurt and some fruit, may take about 1 hour or even 90 minutes to digest. Lastly, liquids digest the quickest in the body. So if you're going into a training session or an event and you haven't eaten properly, forget any judgment on that scenario, drink a little bit of juice. That juice will at least provide your bloodstream with some carbohydrates that will help you for your event. So to summarize, ensure your energy stores are adequate for exercise. And a big part of this is being aware of digestion times and then ensuring that your eating schedule has been set up for race day or for your training session. If you like to train in the morning and you don't wake up with enough time to digest a big breakfast, then it might be better for you to have a light breakfast and some juice, and then maybe have a bigger lunch afterwards. I don't have the right answer for this workshop because, again, this is individual to you when you're going to run your event, when you do your training, and what you enjoy eating and how you enjoy eating. I'm also not going to tell you specifically what foods are best for you to eat. Again, based on the same reasons that everybody's food choices is individual, test a variety of food options. See what works for you. And please, 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 please do not try anything new on race day. Find out what has worked best for you in your training sessions leading up to race day, and then stay the course for race day. If you want to try something new, you can do this for next year's event or for the next event. Now, we can't talk about nutritional strategies without talking about proper hydration. So let's again keep the numbers simple. Prior to exercise, please ensure that you drink at least 1 water bottle of water. So 17 to 20 ounces of water 2 hours prior to exercise roughly equates to one of those 591 milliliter water bottles. During exercise, it's important to drink 7 to 10 ounces of fluid every 10 to 20 minutes. So again, this equates to roughly half a water bottle of water. Finally, post-exercise, it's important to rehydrate your body, and you can do this by thinking about drinking at least 1.5, if not 2 water bottles of water. So 16 to 24 ounces of fluid. Again, this is just a little bit more than 591 milliliters of water if we're looking at the higher end of the scale. Now let's take a look at some tips and tricks to prevent injury. I first want to talk about ensuring a proper warm-up. A warm-up is great at helping reduce the risk of injury, and it can even go so far as to increase your performance if done correctly. So a proper warm-up should consist of 5 to 10 minutes of activity that begins light and gradually increases intensity. The intensity increase should go just about as high as your training day intensity. So as an advanced athlete, let's say you are having a day where you're doing sprint intervals, then because your intensity is higher in the sprint zone, then your warm-up is going to begin light and it's going to go for a longer period, let's say upwards of 10 minutes, from a light walk into a jog, into a run, and then you might just do a few light sprints. And so you've taken 10 minutes to go from light activity and ramp yourself up to your go time intensity. Because this warm-up is long and takes you into a higher intensity, it's completely okay to have a quick little break before you begin your training intervals. For somebody who is doing jogging, then your warm-up might consist of a shorter 5-minute warm-up where you begin with walking into a light jog, and then that jog just becomes your jog. And for those of you walking, well, the walk is light enough to consist as a warm-up. It's also a great idea to take part in some active dynamic stretching of the muscles that you're going to be using for that day. And so I've included some images here of leg swings because we're focusing on running or walking training, and we're really looking at the legs here. So don't worry if people think you're weird. If you're the only one on the seawall who, after the first 5 minutes of walking or jogging, starts to do some lunges to stretch and strengthen the legs, and then performs some leg swings just off on the side, don't worry about it. This is your body, and do whatever, whenever you need to get ready for your exercise. It's not uncommon to actually see that out and about anyways. So a proper warm-up can be key to preventing injury. Make sure that you do light activity for about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the intensity of your day, and definitely make sure that you involve yourself in active dynamic stretches. So moving the body's joints through the stretch. We're also going to look at the concept of cross-training in injury prevention. And cross-training means to train in a different area than what your main event or goal is. So if we're training for the sun run, then cross-training is ultimately going to be anything that is not running or walking training. Running and walking is the same movements in the body. So these are my shoulders, but your legs and hips are doing basically this motion over and over and over again. And so the repetitive strain of those consistent repetitive movements can start to wear on the joints and ache and pain. And so cross training is great because it trains different muscles and joints of the body, and it can help balance and counteract that repetitive motion of your regular training days. And so it is not a bad idea at all in your training days to sometimes substitute a day of walking or running with a day of biking, or maybe you'll take one of those days and you'll do a workout session instead. We can also look at activities that may promote greater stretching and strengthening of the body's joints, specifically looking at stabilizers in the joints. And so again, here I'm using some images that portray yoga and Pilates. These are a couple great exercise or training styles that help strengthen and stretch the body, specifically focusing on stabilizers, but not solely. So cross training is a great way to also help prevent injury. Ensure that in your week and in your month of training, you are getting a healthy balance and mix of different styles of training. Of course, the best way to get better at running is to run. And so in a month's time, the majority of your training days will be running, but you're going to want to ensure you have a nice little balance of other activities in there. And that also helps the mind, and it's fun. Rest. Let's not forget rest. I sometimes like to say that rest and recuperation is sometimes the most underutilized principle of training. And so always ensure that you're giving your body enough rest. And so we can look at rest in many areas, from a day-to-day basis. Do you feel stressed out? Do you feel like you've gotten enough sleep? Okay, this is rest for the body. In fact, if we think of the word stress, there are two types of stress: distress and eustress. And distress, when someone is distressed, it is not a good scenario. So exercise can be a form of distress. It can stress the body, it can break it down. But mental fatigue can also be a form of stress. And this can have a very similar effect on the physiological aspects of the body. Then we also have eustress, and eustress, beginning with EU, relates more to euphoric stress, and this can be a good type of stress. So regardless of how the stress is coming, whether it's physical stress, exercise, high intensity exercise, not enough sleep, or mental stress because maybe you're not taking enough breaks in the day, or you don't have enough activities that are providing positive mental aspects in the day, this can affect your training. So without going into a lecture on rest, ensure you are providing your body with adequate rest, trying to get enough sleep in the day, trying to engage in activities that can help the mind, and then also ensure that your high intensity and low intensity training days are interspersed appropriately. So just to clarify on that last point, again, in your weekly training schedule, ensure that you have programmed adequate rest days for your high intensity training days. Lastly, let's talk about a good stretching routine, because I've been a trainer for almost 20 years. If there is one aspect of the workout routine that most people tend to skip through, it is the stretching routine. So please incorporate a wonderful stretching program into every session of yours. And if you are looking for some stretches or program, please head over to our KPU Sport Rec at Home webpage, and we have a downloadable stretching guide for you. And yeah, so incorporate a 5 to 10 minute stretching routine into every workout session. Stretching can and should be done in some fashion every day of the week. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this little mini workshop. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of basic training methodologies, specifically as they relate to your cardiovascular training. And so again, we looked at the difference between continuous, sustainable, steady state training versus interval training, which may consist of high and low intensities and are great at increasing the intensity that you can perform your cardio. We looked at some nutritional strategies for race day as well as for training. So hopefully you have a few ideas on how you might strategize for your training sessions or for race day a little bit differently than you have been doing now. And then we looked at some tips and tricks to help with injury prevention. As always, never hesitate to reach out to sportrec@kpu.ca if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.